I have to ask you, what's the date of the expiration on this endorsement?
Oh, Steve, no,
No, I have to ask that question. I mean, come on.
You guys in the press are incorrigible. I was literally inaugurated 4 days ago.
Right.
And you're talking about elections 4 years from now.
Yeah, and I am, as you know, Steve, I am still Secretary of State, so I'm out of politics, and I'm forbidden from even hearing these questions.
Right.
Good morning. Welcome to the News Hub. I'm Rolf Winkler, sitting in for Clemency Burton Hill. President Obama and outgoing Secretary of State Hillary Clinton gave a rare joint interview last night on 60 Minutes. While the two have clearly buried the hatchet since their tough '08 primary battle, did we get any hint about Mrs. Clinton's plans for 2016 or whether President Obama would endorse her were she to run for his job? Good morning. Welcome to the News Hub. But we're joined by Michele Swers, Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University, to help us break it down. Professor, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So, politicians don't do anything without shrewdly calculating the implications. What was the purpose of this interview?
I think clearly the purpose was to thank her for being Secretary of State, but also to elevate her, because everyone knows that she's considered the front runner for 2016. And the fact that she agreed to it means she's not ruling that out. Okay.
Now, we didn't get an explicit endorsement from the president, and there was no admission from, I mean, did Steve Kroft even ask if she's running? I mean, was there any point to that? Obviously not.
I think that he probably knew that if he asked, she would give some sort of denial, so he was trying to get at her in different ways. But she did say that her health was very good, and she probably wouldn't be so concerned about reassuring the public about her health if she wasn't at least considering making the run.
What else, Professor, did we learn from this interview?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
What else did we learn from this interview?
I think we didn't learn much from the interview. The interview was clearly designed as a love fest and as something to promote the reputations of both, because President Obama knows that Hillary Clinton is very popular, so spotlighting Hillary Clinton for as long as he can only helps his own image. And Hillary Clinton knows that this is the highest elevation she's going to have in the minds of the public when she's with President Obama, and she probably doesn't want to go out with the sole focus on Benghazi, but wants to be able to have opportunities to talk about her broader legacy at the State Department. Mm-hmm. So I think the interview itself ended up focusing a lot on their relationship and not that much on really her policies as Secretary of State or the future of foreign policy going forward. It was more a promotion of sort of their brands, I guess you would say, in politics.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of their relationship, Steve Kroft spent a lot of time asking whether or not they'd really buried the hatchet from their tough '08 campaign. They said they had, but he did ask, what did President Obama promise Hillary Clinton to get her into his administration?
Yes, and they were very sort of cagey and dodging about that. They weren't explicit about the promises on either side, and you don't expect them to sort of talk about the inside baseball and politics of that. Obviously, most people know that she was able to bring her own staff over to the State Department, so she maybe wasn't as under the control of Obama and his staff as perhaps other cabinet secretaries were. But they didn't want to, I think, get too into the politics of a more difficult time. They've clearly moved past it, and so they want to spotlight the positive.
Mm-hmm. And now, Professor, I want you to take a listen to how Hillary Clinton responded to what the president may have promised her.
It was going to be hard. And
I kept
welcome to hard times. I mean, because the one thing he didn't mention was he basically said, we've got this major economic crisis that may push us into a depression. I'm not going to be able to do a lot to satisfy the built-up expectations for our role around the world. So you're going to have to get out there and,
Professor, one last thing that some critics of this interview said, it was basically a love-in. A lot of this was just these guys talking about how much they really like each other, etc. There weren't a lot of hard questions, particularly on Benghazi. And I wanted to ask you, thinking broadly about 2016, are there any implications for Secretary Clinton from what happened in Libya?
I think that Benghazi does, involve some danger for her. But I think her overall record, which she would focus on in the primary, is a largely positive record, and she's gotten largely positive reviews. But I'm certain that Republicans would try to use what happened in Benghazi to tarnish her reputation, whoever becomes the Republican nominee. The advantage of her being Secretary of State is, other than Benghazi, most of what she's been doing as Secretary of State has been largely out of the realm of the really contentious politics. So she hasn't been involved in any of the debates over the debt ceiling. She was not involved in the debate over healthcare reform, even though she herself has a very large record of being involved in healthcare reform. So the major contentious domestic fights are fights that she was not a part of, and she can sort of remain above politics, as she said, as Secretary of State, focused on things that are more unifying for the populace in the United States.
Okay, Professor, thank you so much for joining us this morning.